Joining us now with more, Megyn Sheikh, a former jihadist turned undercover operative, along with Brad Thor, who's a best-selling author and a former member of the Homeland Security Department's Analytic Red Cell Unit. Thank you both so much for being here. Megyn, let me start with you. Do you believe, I mean, the French president, when we last left off, was talking about whether this man is linked to others. What do you think the odds are he did this by himself?
Yeah, it's usually very rare that it's just one individual. In order to purchase the weapons, I'm sure there's an underlying network of a few or even larger amount of people. Of course, there's still unconfirmed reports that whether or not there was an accomplice, but a lot of times it's not just going to be one individual by themselves.
Mm-hmm. And speak to the inspiration an attack like this creates among other jihadis.
Well, I mean, of course, the ISIS fanboys are cheering the attacks. They're, they're doing their Photoshop. They're showing images of France suffering. People holding caskets. This is exactly what they do. They cheer it on. They're very happy about it. They celebrate it, and that's exactly what we're seeing them doing right now.
Brad, this evening, some Democrats were holding an anti-gun gathering on Capitol Hill. They paused for a moment of silence for the victims in Nice. But after we saw the Orlando terror attack, this country, half of it, turned to the issue of guns. What we see tonight here in Nice, yes, the man had some guns. He also had grenades inside of that truck. But he killed those 77 people, most of them, with a truck he drove down a promenade. Your thoughts?
Well, absolutely. This has never been about gun control. This has been about fundamentalist Islamic terrorist control. And what we're hearing out of France right now, the French newspaper in Nice, Nice Matin, that this was a 31-year-old resident of Nice with Tunisian roots. Now, I don't know if he was born in Tunisia and his parents moved, part of the Pieds Noirs, the big migration of people from the North African French colonies into France. But that's something that's breaking right now. But as your other guests have said, and I think it's very, very important, Megyn, we need to go after the ideology, particularly, and Mr. Bennett was on it. We've got to break the back of the fundamentalist ideology. Zuhdi Jasser's a great friend of mine, one of the guys that definitely should be helping the administration work with this. But if we don't get serious about going after what is fueling this, we are going to lose. We are at war, and only one side is going to win, and it has to be the West.
But what does that look like, Brad?
What does it look like? Well, number one, it looks like, I think General Flynn had a great point, which is let's get the King of Saudi Arabia, because a lot of money is flowing from Saudis into the Wahhabi sect that creates a lot of this violence. Let's get the King of Saudi Arabia coming out and saying this is not okay. Let's get the King of Jordan's been a great friend of ours, but let's get Morsi in Egypt, and let's push the Iranians to disavow this kind of stuff too. You're either with us or you're against us, now more than ever.
And yet we're not seeing that. And it makes you wonder what will it take before we do see that, Megyn. I mean, if President Obama or the next president calls you into the Oval Office and says, any thoughts on diminishing the ideology, on stopping the radicalization, what do you say?
Well, what they need to do is, have the scholars, the Islamic scholars, step up their role, take the lead. If they're theologians, if they're running educational institutions where people are being taught this kind of interpretation, they need to correct that interpretation. They need to teach them the proper rules of interpretation. You don't take, an individual. What you're seeing now with these extremists is it's do-it-yourself Islam. It's an individual who goes to the Quran and decides, I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to apply it, and you become a vigilante, and that's what they're doing. So I think religious scholars and theologians need to take the lead when it comes to the theological side of things. When it comes to the military side of things, Muslim armies need to be the ones to be doing this. It's great that the U.S. and the coalition are involved, but there need to be Muslim armies more involved.
Brad, what we typically see here is President Obama will come out with a statement. He had a paper statement tonight, and then he will warn that there shouldn't be a backlash against American Muslims, which there shouldn't. But the country repeatedly, when we've had these terror attacks, be they in the country of an ally like France or right here at home, they don't feel that he gets it, that he feels the urgency and the fright and the anger that so many Americans more and more are starting to feel, in a way that may be mobilizing the country toward next steps where they weren't perhaps right after the Iraq War.
Megyn, I can't even begin to gauge what the president goes through sitting in the Oval Office. So I want to be very careful about casting aspersions. But I, as a citizen, get the strong feeling that if he thought it would offend somebody to tell him what was causing cancer, that he would not tell them what was causing their cancer. I mean, we've got a real problem here. And when you see attacks in Orlando, San Bernardino, in Brussels, and in Paris, that's cancer that is spread. We need to go to the heart of where this cancer is growing and cut it out. And we need our Muslim partners to go after it hardcore, because us non-Muslim, we cannot bring about a reformation in Islam. And that's what Islam needs. Christianity's had one. Judaism has had one. Islam is in desperate need of a reformation.
Istanbul's already been forgotten, basically. Orlando, we barely mention it now. It just happened a couple of weeks ago. Guys, thank you.
Thank you, Megyn.